all, let me greet my old friends here who will be participating in this session. The session will be devoted to the future agenda, new agenda for future studies, and it's a very interesting issue. I hope we'll have brilliant discussions during this session. So our first speaker will be Victor Motti from Alternative Planetary Futures Institute, United States of America. So Victor, it's very good to see you here. Please, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Very good to see you.
With your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
Great. Thank you so much again for this invitation, and I'm very much excited to have this conversation today about the new agenda for the future studies in the long term. I'm going to share my screen if possible. Do you see my screen right now?
Yeah, but we see it, but not full screen. Now it's fine.
It's fine?
Yes, now it's okay.
Great. Perfect. So the title or the topic of today's presentation is on the very important shift in our thinking about the term of globalization, which we already know is in retreat in many different countries. And given the recent events, I mean, the trade wars between the United States and China and other countries, everybody is wondering what could happen to the future of globalization. And today I'm going to present some sort of an alternative prescription for this whole idea. First of all, let me point it out that this term that I'm using today, which is planetization, is actually very helpful for inspiring people and, of course, the new generation to reach for the stars and be prepared for supporting the space programs. I'm going to explain it further during my talk today. But the very short answer to this question, I mean, how to inspire future generation to reach for the stars, might be that, like many of the astronauts and cosmonauts, we need to cultivate the overview effect, the sense of looking at the planet Earth from the space. But the very long and slow answer is in the topic of planetary identity and how we can cultivate this sense of longing to the planet Earth. Well, obviously, right now, we have achieved a lot in terms of making our planet interconnected and using different technologies, communication, information technologies, and all the different infrastructure that is already in place. We have been able to bring the world closer and provide lots of different opportunities to have this interconnectedness possible. But at the same time, we are experiencing a lot of different challenges in terms of social fragmentation and ethical dilemmas, like the one we have already seen. And my point, and of course, this point is not very new, it goes back to a lot of previous work, is that we need to go beyond the simple framework of facilitation of economic collaboration between different countries. And we need to consider how to enrich and complement this process of globalization with what we call it planetization. And the topic or the concept of planetization as an alternative or as a complementary solution for globalization is obviously not a new concept. It has been put forward by different scholars. Among them, one of the pioneers was Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was one of the earliest scholars who mentioned that we need to think about the planet as a whole and to envision achieving some level of planetary consciousness. And this prescription and this framework encourage or invite people to, in addition to exchange of goods and services, we need to have exchanges of ideas, exchanges of cultures, exchanges of ways of life, etc. As you can obviously note that within the globalization process, we are interested only in trade and buying and selling, exporting, importing, but very much little focus is put on the topic of or the necessity of looking at the exchanges between cultures, between civilizations, between different sets of ideas and belief systems. So what we can say here is that in the planetization process, we should also give some place to poets, artists, and philosophers, alongside the usual leaders or champions of globalization, which are obviously entrepreneurs and exporters, importers. This planetization will help humanity enter the new phase of the evolution of the civilization on the planet Earth, and will provide some necessary cultural and intellectual richness to the whole topic of interconnectedness between different continents, between different countries and civilizations and cultures. Almost all of you have heard about the different spheres that we are familiar with them, like the atmosphere, which is about the layer around the planet, which supports life, and of course, biosphere, the ecosystem, biodiversity, geosphere, hydrosphere, heliosphere. Lots of these spheres are basically related to the physical aspect of the planet. But what the key contribution that is right now missing from the whole picture is noosphere, the term that was originally coined by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, which is about an intangible sphere around the planet, or a layer which is invisible, but we know that it exists. And that sphere is actually driving the whole ideas that we have, all the values that we embrace, and all the belief system. And there have been some very macro thinkers like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin or Vladimir Vernadsky, who has written the book, The Biosphere Theory. These scholars and philosophers and futurists, I should say also, have been proposing the idea that the biosphere is shaping the planet and the geosphere and other spheres that you can see here. And many of the professional futurists are obviously, in a sense, generalists, not specialists. So when we are talking about the future directions of the foresight, I should say that foresight is generally understood or recognized as an interesting interdisciplinary field which enrich the tool set and theories available to us to look at the big picture. But what is the biggest picture conceivable? And some scholars like Howard Bloom have proposed the idea that we need to create a new science or develop a new science that he calls it omnology. So omnology obviously could be something like a new terminology that is useful to think about what could be the best way to describe all the interconnected disciplines, sciences, arts, humanities, and looking at the patterns that are driving the dynamics and evolution on all of these very large scales, interconnected systems of systems. So it's an ambitious project. I mean, if you think about how to develop scenarios for the human civilization on this planet, we need to think about the units of analysis to be as big as possible, like including atmosphere, noosphere, geosphere, biosphere. And omnology is actually a very useful framework here that was appropriately coined by scholars like Howard Bloom. And it is inviting us, not only futurist, professional, foresight practitioners like us, but also other disciplines, even history, philosophy, and art, to come together and look at the biggest picture conceivable and think about the integrative aspects of the whole, of the holistic picture that is available to us. So the synergy among these spheres is essential for this integral planetary well-being. And what we need to do to cultivate this planetary consciousness. We have done a lot. I mean, we have been able to create this internet and the infrastructure around the planet, of course, the whole satellite around the planet, all the different projects that are right now ongoing with respect to globalization already. But to achieve this holistic understanding of our interconnected world, we need to do more. And by that, I generally mean, first of all, we need to recognize the relationship among these planetary spheres I mentioned, not only focusing only on these physical spheres around the planet, but also on the intangible and the abstract layers of the planetary scale around the Earth, and what could be the impact between all of among all of these elements to drive the future evolution of our planetary civilization and, of course, planetary identity. Another action point is think about forming alliances and finding common ground with others beyond one's community. So this symposium itself is a good example of the kind of alliances that is happening right now. I am here in Washington, D.C. Our colleague Alexander Sokolov is in Moscow, and other participants from all over the world are joining each other in this symposium to find common ground with respect to the future of the planet. Again, I'm very much insisting on the use of the planet as opposed to the term globalization, because the term globalization has been deeply politicized, and right now you have been following lots of different signals of change with respect to the growing conflict, confrontation between the United States and China, and you have seen the rising trade war between the two countries. But what is missing from the whole picture, according to this community of scholars, is obviously that missing part, which is planetization. And it's not going to be a replacement, but actually an enrichment or complementary aspect of the bringing together all the different parts of the planet together. And another distinction here is that it's not anthropocentric, because globalization is basically concerned the humans and the humanity, but planetary, when they say planetary, it basically means to be inclusive of all the life forms on the planet. And guess what? Since the pandemic of the recent pandemic, COVID-19, there has been an increasingly interest in the topic of planetary health, for example. And by that, people are beginning to understand that our well-being, our health is interconnected to the well-being and health of the planet itself. And this is actually a good indication of what is possible and what could be happening in the long-term future. And I was listening today to the previous speaker, and she was talking about the role of artificial intelligence and the use of it in doing foresight. So this recent book that was published by me recently, Planetary Foresight and Ethics, is a good example of using AI to be creative and to generate a book about the long-term scenarios and the long-term visions for the planet. And you see that with the good supervision and with the good ethical engagement of our technologies like AI, we can accelerate this whole process or the whole vision towards planetization. Let me close this today with the key message here, and that key message should be that the planetization will foster global harmony through the free exchange of ideas, culture, and values and belief systems. We need to have a good commitment to this whole process of planetary consciousness and prioritize ethical progress. And Carl Sagan, the very well-known popular science figure in the US and of course outside, has a very nice quote with respect to this planetization and planetary thinking. He says that our planet is the loneliest speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all its vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. So this planetary society is, of course, one of the legacies of Carl Sagan. So you see that lots of different actors in this whole ecosystem are coming from space backgrounds. Most of them are space technologies. But again, we need to have an interdisciplinary approach to be inclusive of cultural icons, to be inclusive of social scientists and philosophers, political scientists, and of course, non-Western scholars. And this will be a good shift towards that vision that I am talking about, the cultivation of the planetary identity and planetary consciousness. So I stop here, and if you have questions, I will be happy to talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. It was a very good introduction to our session. Any questions from audience? I don't see many. I only see that there is one addition to your citation on Carl Sagan. Can you see it, Victor?
Say it again.
I mean, in chat we have a addition to the citation of Mr. Sagan, which you made.
Mm-hmm. Let me check the chat. To add in Carl Sagan, the most terrifying fact about the universe is not that it is hostile, but that is indifferent. But if we can come to terms with indifference, then our existence as a species have huge genuine meaning. However, lest the darkness, we must supply our own light. Yeah, interesting stuff. So
okay.
this is from Stanley Kubrick. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question. From Nikita Litvinov. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. How do you think can this planetization be a sort of attempt to make the end of history 2.0, which Fukuyama tried to envision in the 90s, or it would be something different from what he believed to happen?
Yeah, I mean, Fukuyama, I think, is basically saying that in that end of history frame that probably the liberal democracy as a sort of ideology is going to prevail. But the planetization is not about a single ideology. The planetization is actually inviting all the different ideologies to come together, have a deeper dialogue about what has worked and what has not worked, and what are the cons and pros and different aspects of each ideologies. In this book that I mentioned today, The Planetary Foresight and Ethics, I am speculating that in the next phase of the planetary or planetization evolution on our Earth, there will be a sort of an explosion of ideologies and new belief systems. And there has been some argument, of course, provided in that book, based on the fact that because of the role of the AI revolution in the job market and the economic infrastructure, we will be seeing a lot of growing concerns about massive unemployment, and on the positive side, a lot of free time for humanity to explore new activities, not having necessarily a job. So I am assuming that more free time will be implying that more people will be involved in reconsideration of the ethical principles, values, and providing new mixtures of ideologies. So I am guessing based on this argument that the more people are unemployed because of the technological revolution, in particular AI, there will be more time for either political participation or some other sorts of activity in the society, including this kind of creative approaches to new ideologies. When people are not necessarily going to do a lot of 9-to-5 jobs, they will begin to think about new sets of ideas, new sets of ethics, new sets of values and belief systems. So that could be an interesting scenario to monitor in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any more questions?
Yes, one more
Please.
question. Yeah, Victor, please tell. Progress is often tied with somehow competitive strategies, yeah, or the spirit of competition. And if an era of universal consensus suddenly arrives, will it bring us a new phase of development or not? How do you think?
So if I got your question right, you are saying that competition and conflict is not going to disappear anytime soon, right? So I think, yeah, in some respect, yeah, you are right. And of course, there are other aspects to the natural way of doing things. And of course, there are certain arguments in favor of more competition, more brutal conflicts between the different countries and nations and cultures. But to avoid the worst case scenario, obviously, we need to also be thinking about a more cooperative and compassionate way to prepare also for the next phase on the planet civilization. And a very interesting topic in this respect is the topic of the synergy that I included that in our the presentation today. Synergy is not even cannot even be considered as a way of collaboration or cooperation. It's something totally transformative in the sense that sometimes you can combine the different cultures and bring the different assets of different countries and civilization together and create something entirely new. And we need to be as much creative as possible to consider and explore those opportunities for synergies. And by that, it could happen from both the technical and physical aspects of synergy, and of course, the synergy among ideas and the synergy among cultures. So obviously, as a foresight practitioner would say that we need to think about the different scenarios and all the range of possible and plausible futures. But we should be also looking at what lies beyond the usual range of different scenarios that are based only on conflict and competition.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. I guess at this point we can move to the second speaker.
Thank you.
Who is Attila Havas from Institute of Economics from Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Attila, are you with us? Yes, please share your screen and please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just two minor corrections. I don't work anymore for the Institute of Economics. I was fired. I have a special position with the Center for Economic and Regional Studies, a kind of research associate without being paid. And it doesn't belong to the Academy of Sciences. It was, the whole network, research network, was confiscated by the government more than 5 years ago.
Oh, excuse me, I didn't know. I didn't know. Okay.
No, this is, yeah. I see that in these more than 5 years that people strongly associate the Institute and the Center with the Academy of Sciences.
Mm-hmm.
But the good news is that the government is still active, and they are still, they have caused lots of troubles, but they haven't given up. They are causing more troubles for the research network. They are very active and they are full of ideas and energy and resources to destroy autonomy of scientific research. And now they have a very strong support from the big brother, or actually the third big brother, because they already had two big brothers. So this is, the title is very simple, Futures of Foresight. I should stress that by foresight, I don't mean the big family of forward-looking activities or prospective analysis. I only mean foresight, which is a participatory process aimed at supporting decision-making processes and considers multiple futures. So probably some ideas actually would be relevant, perhaps with some amendment to the other family members, but I would like to focus on foresight in this strict sense. And this is the very beginning of a thought process. It is, we can call it a thought experiment. The idea is to provoke, spark, instigate, and guide some dialogues on our future. By our, I mean for foresight practitioners, but as I said, it might be possible to extend, amend to the other family members as well. We have already heard today as well, and many times earlier, that we are faced by complex, urgent, and major challenges with fundamental impacts. I don't list these. So in a kind of optimistic understanding, foresight and other FLAs probably or hopefully would be even more in demand to underpin decisions by politicians, policymakers, business people, non-governmental organizations, or any type of actions of citizens, non-decision maker. I mean, formally, legally, so players who don't have formal legal decision-making competence, but of course, we are all making decisions in our everyday life, day-to-day life. A tricky question whether for current foresight approaches and methods would be able to meet these demands. I think the simple answer is that most likely not, That's why it is useful. Of course, it's speculative, but it is still useful to start this thought experiment on our future. And these are the main questions. What new factors would reshape the context in which foresight is used, and foresight itself? How do foresight practitioners and practices need to adapt to these new contexts and new types of demand? Which drivers and trends would influence these change processes? And what new opportunities would open up to improve the current foresight practices and increase the chance for wider and more effective use of insights generated by foresight processes? So very simple questions, nothing complicated, but ambitious. So just a first take on the trends and drivers that might have disruptive impacts on the environment of foresight. So in short, the external factors, the crisis, what I alluded to very briefly, but perhaps even more importantly, the pace of transformative or disruptive changes on the one hand, versus the time needed for analysis, especially prospective, forward-looking analysis on the other hand. And obviously, once we can start a dialogue, then the participants of this dialogue would come up with other major external factors as well. In short, these external factors would have a decisive impact on the demand for, on the one hand, and the supply of, on the other hand, of foresight. So demand for foresight and supply of foresight. So to start with the demand for foresight, of course, as we see, unfortunately, quite vividly in recent times, the ideological stances, the main features of political regimes are decisive, whether they are interested in any meaningful analysis, any dialogue, any advice, any deliberative processes, or they want to follow a technocratic approach following the advice of a small set of highly selective experts who are likely to support the ideas of politicians, or even just following the autocratic or populist ideas, not even considering the advice from experts who are willing to serve these regimes. Besides that, it is also important whether foresight and other participatory methods and processes in general would be able to generate, improve trust or lose trust among various stakeholder groups. Another important factor would be the types of policy governance subsystems where policy decisions are being made. In a paper with Matthias Weber, we have characterized these policy governance subsystems by from three angles, whether those are consensual versus antagonistic, so how power is distributed and how power is used by various actors, especially decision-making power. Also, whether they are relying on systematic versus sporadic use of policy preparatory tools, and whether the policy governance subsystem is based on process versus output legitimation. I think these are quite simple ideas, but these have rather important implications for foresight in particular, or other forward-looking activities in more general. Luke Georgiou quite some time ago came up with the idea that we can witness generations of foresight starting from standalone, highly visible foresight which were characteristic in the 80s, 90s, both in Asia and Europe, towards, so from these standalone, highly visible foresight processes to fully embedded, almost invisible foresight processes. So I'm embedded in decision-making processes, policy-making processes. And another important factor would be whether the trend, which already started, that foresight, originally it was used, even it was called technology foresight, but more recently it is being used beyond STI policy domains, whether this trend would continue and to what extent, at what pace. The other side of the coin is the supply of foresight. So we can consider the trends and drivers that might have impacts, especially disruptive impacts on the supply of foresight. We have already considered today some new methods. Also, for instance, Fabian was asking about the training and supply of foresight practitioners especially vis-a-vis these new methods. By the way, my simple or perhaps even simplistic, simplified answer would be that we need, of course, we need teamwork. So that's the way to combine expertise from various communities of practice. Also, because partly or to a large extent because of the polycrisis we are faced by now, new concepts of future or futures concepts are emerging. For instance, a British political scientist coined the term temporal claustrophobia. That means the sense of running out of time because of the pressing major issues, major problems. But in his recent book, he is arguing for not to be a victim of this claustrophobia. So he maintains that we need to consider multiple futures. We should not believe that all the options are already closed. A kind of variety of this or version of this is that climate change or even a climate catastrophe can severely constrain the options for future activities. So the future is not as open as we tend to believe, that we can shape the future by taking actions now, driven by a vision developed jointly with various representatives of stakeholder groups. Also, we need to consider how the ways through which we can explore possible future changes would emerge, whether we would have more neutral or like big data based processes and methods, or more value loaded approaches, or what would be the mix of these neutral and value loaded approaches. Also, whether we would rely on more creative versus more automated approaches and methods. And already today we had that some important elements of that discussion, or in the sense of dialogue consideration. And of course, the real issue is the mix of various approaches and methods. So what approaches and methods would be put together in an actual foresight process? Because obviously there is no blueprint, there is no best practice, and clearly that there would be no blueprint, and there would be no best practice for an optimal or ideal foresight process, regardless of the context, regardless of the issue to be considered. Also, most likely in the next 10, 15 years, new methods would evolve. And the question is that the link between the emergence of new demands and the emergence of the development and the use of these new methods. And for instance, ethical considerations most likely would play a more explicit role than we used to have. Actually, the previous presentation was a good example of that, or we can reinterpret, hopefully. It is not...
Excuse me, 2 minutes more, okay?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Also, it would be important why and how clients would redefine their needs while searching for orientations to underpin their decisions and strategic assessment. And probably we need to consider whether new types of clients would emerge and what needs they would express, and how to support these rethinking of foresight processes and foresight methods, especially by sense making. Also, we need to consider what stakeholder groups need to be involved for more fruitful foresight processes, what new types of stakeholders would need to be represented. For instance, currently actives, neglected citizens, those who, given their social status or lack of communication skills, expertise, lack of willingness, they are partly excluded, but they would be also shy to participate. Whether we would find ways to represent nature. So again, there is a very close link, the planetary approach. How to think about the future, unborn generations, in other words. I would be more radical concerning AI, not how. So I think it is important to consider not just how AI can help in analytical processes, but the big issue is whether AI would have agency, whether AI would become a stakeholder in these processes. And I don't have an answer, of course. And there might be new approaches and methods to express, include and reflect upon the aspirations and visions for these new participants, new stakeholders. And probably, it's already happening actually, that new so-called low threshold participation methods needed, and they are evolving to involve laypersons as active, committed participants. So gaming is one way. So my last slide is that we would like to continue by interviewing foresight practitioners and actual or potential clients to discuss this proposed framework, to collect and discuss trends and drivers, the factors of change, hopefully a survey as well, and then scenarios to describe some possible futures, and then those scenarios would serve as a basis for further discussions, further dialogue. And a promising sign is that just last week, so there is a Horizon Europe project called Eye of Europe. This is a coordination and support action. And this project is going to organize a workshop in a few months exactly on these issues. So I'm really looking forward to this continued dialogues, and whenever there would be possibilities, I would like to inform you whether and how you can participate in this dialogue. Thank you. You are muted, Alexander.
Excuse me, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. You are as systemic as usual, yeah, I must say, yeah. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions, probably, if anybody has questions. If not, I probably just like to proceed. I'm sorry. Yes, Fabian, sorry, I did not.
Yeah, always.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Attila, for this very interesting presentation. I mean, listening to you, what comes to my mind is the fact that what we have seen during the last 30 years is that in time of crisis, you're absolutely right. The future is closing down. I mean, all the options are being closed. And we can see that there is kind of two layers, maybe even two communities of futurists. One community, which is, I would say, real thinker. It's not a word, but
Pragmatist.
yeah, more pragmatist and futurists that will work only on, finally, on anticipating the future beyond the crisis. Dealing with real data, not doing forecasting, but doing more anticipatory work. While you have another kind of community, I would say, of futurists more dedicated to imagination, especially with design, with speculative fiction and this kind of thing, trying to open up again the future by developing a very, very imaginative and large participatory reflection about the future with artists and everything, which is really something very participative. But this kind of community and work and practice of foresight is very, very far from the decision makers. And when decision makers get the result of this work, they don't know what to do with it. And in France, we have had several times this problem, especially in territorial foresight, when you have thousands of inhabitants describing the city of the future, and then the mayor just look at that and say, what can I do with this? It's too far away from the reality. So I think that this is where we are today in terms of foresight, with anticipation in one way, and something that is more imaginary and I would say design oriented in another way. It just to have.
Yeah, I think these are very important observations. So I don't take these as questions, but as an opportunity to continue in a way. So I try to be optimistic instead of being absolutely pessimistic. So we have ample reasons to be pessimistic nowadays. But we have an old saying, not for these issues, more for... so the old saying is that necessity is the mother of invention. So when there is a strong need, then simply you must be creative, and you need to find new ways, new opportunities, you identify new opportunities, and think about new solutions, new options, because there is a strong pressure. Otherwise, you would not survive, to put it simple. And now, if we take, for instance, the geopolitical developments in the last few months, then we see that just one example, the UK, which left the EU, now they are very close allies with EU members, and faraway countries like Canada and Australia, they are also forming bonds, and they try to find solutions to the current problem. So I see some hope, but definitely, yeah, I agree with all the observations you made. And so instead of being pessimistic, I think we and all other citizens, or most of the citizens, especially politicians, need to see this new context, these new circumstances as a strong pressure to act, definitely to act, so not to be passive, and to act differently, in a more creative way, in a more unusual way.
Okay, thank you very much for this optimistic continuation. Yes, so we are run out of time. So
Victor raised his hand.
Yes, Victor, please,
Yeah,
very short, okay?
Just a
Dr.
very
Hassan.
short question from Professor Havas. So the question is that in consideration of looking at the participatory aspect of foresight, I can see that some people will say that we need to make it much more playful. I mean, the whole process of foresight to be much more entertaining in a sense of inclusive of all the different ways to make people provide their input into the process through plays, games, or other entertaining aspects. We already see that politics, at least in the US, is much more entertaining, has to be entertaining, and the other processes is also becoming much more embracing of the elements of entertainment. So how do you consider the future of foresight as a participatory process to be much more inclusive of entertaining or playful aspects of the whole design and deliberations and delivery of the insights?
No, I have not been involved in any of such processes, but I've seen some such processes. And those colleagues who have been involved in developing games, cards, they were satisfied. So I think this is one of the promising directions, but I cannot provide more details because of lack of personal experience. Thank you.
Oh, okay, now we can move to the next speaker, which is Jonathan Cale from University of Ottawa, and also from HEC University, I must say. So Jonathan, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, my friend. This presentation is going to be different from two reasons, and Alexander, I might need your help in this one. Number one, I had emergency eye surgery the other day, so I'm having, it's not easy for me to do this, so if I have mistakes in my slides, I apologize. Number two, look at the heading behind me. Normally, you see me as an HSE professor, University of Ottawa, and UNESCO, and that certainly is going to be relevant in terms of what I'm doing today. But let me just try to share this here. You guys see the screen? But I'm also today coming in under my auspices of the Board of Advisors for the Strategic Consortium of Intelligence Professionals, 30,000 plus members around the world dealing with intelligence, competitive intelligence, market insight, and the like. I'm also the chair of the Canadian Intelligence Center of Excellence as well. And so I'm here both as an academic, but also very much as an association person to, pardon the way this sounds, kick you guys in the ass. And I really do hope that the presentation will lead to an active dialogue, if not today, then afterwards. And you'll understand why as I go through. Now, this presentation is actually based on two academic articles, one which is already out in TFSC. It's actually coming out in June. Another one that's now under second review with Futures. And so we're trying to push an agenda within the academic community that you guys who know me well know I've been talking about for a while. But here's what's been happening in the professional world. CI and Foresights have been working together big time. In April 24, APF, which you all know, and SCIP that I just mentioned, signed an affiliation agreement. In 2025, two relatively major organizations, one a foresight company, Futures Platform, and another a market insight competitive intelligence company, merged to pioneer it's called AI-driven futures intelligence. And then in February 25, I don't know how many of you know Yvette. She's been so major person within the foresight practitioner community. She did a SCIP webinar called Ask a Futurist, an exploration into the world of strategic foresight. So this is at the professional level. This is just a bit of it. And strategic foresight in particular has been hot within competitive intelligence. We have had webinars on it as early as 2019. Valona, another major CI consultancy, has something called the Strategic Foresight Playbook, and Commentelli, another big CI firm, combined with Futures Platform for how to CI and strategic foresight work together. So there is so much excitement about this in the practitioner area that it's really interesting that when I submitted the first version to Futures of the article, and now I did the revisions, about 18 different strategic foresight programs emerged that I was able to include. And kudos to the viewers who said, focus on strategic foresight. I'm not going to read all of this. I don't expect you all to read it, but it gives you an idea from that article on working together, the webinar, how they saw strategic foresight and CI working together. So the practitioners have had no problem saying these two fields belong together, they need to work together, and they are actively working together. Now, what we saw also was, and you might know her, and I love her, Tanya Schindler, who is a gift to Futures, who's also been involved in the CI community, recently stepped down as the president of APF. She gave a really insightful presentation at the Skip European conference last year, where she traced out the evolution of competitive intelligence. And again, she also was CI. In fact, she was one of the speakers in the early days at a Skip Europe conference. And she said CI to market intelligence, business intelligence, and now she says you're futures intelligence. And she was making the link to what she was doing and why she transitioned from CI to futures and foresight. So again, I can give you lots of material here, but it is the evolution the field has gone through. Now, interestingly enough, Louis Madeira et al. Did a really interesting piece of research on the CI side, not foresight. So again, you know, to what extent do the fields know about each other? He interviewed 61 people that are recognized as world leaders in competitive intelligence. Those include academics like me. It includes practitioners who are well known. They would be CI fellows, corporate units, and asked them about what they do and what they think CI is. Then he reviewed in his team the corpus of competitive intelligence literature. As you can see the numbers there, it's very impressive, close to 2,000 that met the screen, ran it through a AI-based tool and machine learning to come up with this, in a sense, definition, if you want to think of it that way, of what is competitive intelligence. Now, again, for the futures foresight community, you don't collect intelligence. As you can see from here, there's a lot that goes into the development of it. But what I want you to realize, and this is again from an academic study, is when you ask CI practitioners what they do and the skills they need, the purpose goes to decision-making, and notice, anticipate, and foresight systems are in there. And this means it was mentioned frequently enough. In terms of the output, the outcome, foresight is mentioned again. And when looking at the skills and capabilities, foresight's mentioned again. So whether CI professionals realized that there was a foresight world and APF exists, which they kind of didn't, and Dick Clavens and I did a neat little study of foresight and CI, and we saw that the communities didn't seem to be coming together. In fact, they weren't even citing similar corpus of knowledge. But for some reason, the intelligence practitioners were going, we got to do foresight. And so it's no wonder that the two fields professionally started coming together. So it's a very simple research question, which was, given how active the practitioner community has been in bringing foresight and competitive intelligence together, in particular strategic foresight, the question is, are we doing the same thing in academia? And that's an important question because our role is to inform, to advise, and to study. And if this is a major area in terms of what's happening in the practice world, and again, we know from the studies, many organizations in Europe have both intelligence or insight units and foresight units, then maybe we as academics need to look into this. And so the question was, are we, and what advice can we provide them? So a very simple question, are CI and foresight researchers working on joint programs? I mean, it's happening, as you saw, in the practitioner world. And number two, is there a significant body of scholarship that's linking these two things together? And it could be from CI, it could be from foresight, it really doesn't matter. It's the question of, are we linking it together? And again, that's why when I looked at the CI world, it wasn't clear to me that all those managers knew about the foresight, our foresight world, but they were putting it in. Really simple way to do it. Do a Scopus search, strategic foresight, competitive intelligence, article title, abstract, or keywords. That leaves it relatively broad. The result was only 7 documents, 3 in academic journals. And when I reviewed all of them, None of them were about strategic foresight and competitive intelligence. It was more secondary, where they put it in the keywords, or they put it in the abstract. But then the only other place I saw it in the article was either one reference in the article or references in the bibliography. So I said, okay, let's open it up and say foresight and competitive intelligence. Let's make it bigger. I mean, even though strategic foresight is the hot topic, let's do competitive intelligence. And as it says on the bottom, I tried market intelligence, market insight, no improvement. Result was 24 documents in academic journals. Now, I reviewed them. Only 10 of them had both CI and foresight in their keywords, and anything that looked meaningful. I then read every one of them. Only one, two kind of, and I'll explain that in a second, had authors that with both CI and foresight expertise. In other words, a team up between a foresight practitioner or academic and CI. And 3 articles primarily focused, involved foresight and competitive intelligence. So in other words, either a foresight or an intelligence academic writing an article that combines the 2 fields together and explains them, but that was it. It was 3. And I'll go through this very quickly because I know we're short on time. These are the authors. You can see again what the focus was. Pretty good journals. We're going down this lines are the authors and the focus. So on the first one, CI and foresight secondary. The second one, foresight for intelligence. There's a lot of foresight for intelligence readers. Alexander, you'll recall that we did a foresight and STI governance special issue on CI, and that was actually the intent. It was to tell the foresight world about competitive intelligence. And there's some articles that tell foresight to competitive intelligence professionals, but that's really the bulk of it. As you go down this page, and I got to apologize, is that you look at it and you go, once again, there's only one on this page, and surprise, surprise, they're all me. Okay, and that's not good. That says that there seems to be a dominant author within this. But the bottom line is, if all I can say is there are 3 that are really linking the 2 together, and one author responsible for most of them, it's not really an area that is being explored. That's really lagging behind the practitioner community. Richard Clavens, who's pioneered techniques for mapping of knowledge fields in academia, and we can talk about him at a later point, he's very clear, this is not a research community. So this does not exist. It's me running around with a few of my friends and a couple of others, and that's it. So you take a look at that and you go, all right, so there's clearly nothing there. I tried to open up the search as much as I could. I'm not finding anything. Interestingly, in the early days, and this is my friend, may he rest in peace, Jack Smith. Many of you will remember him fondly as the Chief Foresight Officer for Canada. When we looked at it, because we came together as friends and we realized that the 2 fields naturally belong together. And in 2009, we contrasted it and we said, both are decision-making. Now, everything you're reading in here is consistent with what was said in the 2025 webinar. Orientation perspectives, CI is inside out, foresight is outside in. So CI says, here's the strategy that we're thinking about. Will it work in the environment? Foresight says, let's look at the environment, forgetting the company, roll it back in. Temporal orientation, CI, we said, has a shorter temporal orientation than foresight. Michael Jackson from Shaping Tomorrow told me that's not true. He's been seeing too many 5-year horizon studies to actually say foresight is really about 25, 50 years out. But we'll stand by that for a moment. And then Richard Clavens, who's technical intelligence, says my projects are 25 to 50 years out. So I'll leave that one alone for a moment. And then predictive. Foresight's less predictive. When you read the literature, they don't claim to predict. When you read the intelligence literature, they're saying high probability it's going to occur. Foresight talks about multiple plausible futures. CI generally focuses on one future. And it's kind of neat when you see the differences and the similarities. So the idea was, with the literature that is there.
Excuse me, Jordan, 1 minute, please, okay?
Yeah, how do the fields come together? Number one, they complement each other, and we've seen that. Do we see overlap in approaches with analytical methodologies? So there definitely is something going on when you take these lists. CI has timelining. Foresight has backcasting. CI has scenarios, and so does Foresight, but they're different. So again, a lot of overlap between them, as we found out, but no academic literature. So here's the challenge. We need to talk about what we can do together as communities. And this is the kick in the butt to everybody here. Given that the private sector, the associations, professionals, governments are doing this, the question is, what do we as academics do? I mean, is this a matter of CI takes over Foresight, Foresight takes over CI, or do we coordinate? Think about this. Do we do research on, given that you have two of these things going, how do you manage them? How do you integrate? Who controls? What defines whether it's a competitive intelligence project or whether it's a Foresight project? How do we work together? How do we learn from each other? I've learned a lot thanks to HSE on techniques that I can then port over. And if you follow HSE's evolution in Foresight, they've learned from me as well. And we've seen that coming together. And finally, why are there no joint research teams? Why are there no joint conferences, no joint consortiums? Why have we not seen a combination between the two? Now, there was one conference 5 years ago where Oscar Saritas and we went into it with a joint issue, one of Futures and one of JISIB, the Intelligence Journal. But that was two friends going, let's make this thing happen and try to push the agenda. But we need to see more of us coming together if we are going to go and not even lead anymore, if we're going to try to be catching up and forming. And why I'm glad I'm presenting this here is if you listen to the Attila's presentation right before, it's bang on. He's talking about evolution and what can happen in the Foresight field. I can tell you what's going to be happening, evolution in the competitive intelligence field. Why in heaven's name are we not getting together and saying jointly, this is the common area of exploration where we can each help each other? And so that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. It's a little about a lot from private sector, a lot from government, a lot from association, and a little from academia. So there's the challenge, gang, and I welcome all your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. You're very live as usual. Any questions from the audience? No questions yet. Maybe people are tired a little bit. I have just one question to you, okay? Very practical. Maybe we could organize something within one of the events devoted to competitive intelligence, fully devoted to Foresight, so that we could invite Foresight practitioners and discuss what to do.
So it's an interesting idea, and it's been tried. So I am the academic chair for the SCIP conferences. So we have one in New Orleans next in 2 weeks. We'll be in Marrakesh early December. We had one in Prague, one in Barcelona. And I did reach out to the members of the Foresight community and one of the cool things about going to that conference is if the academic paper is accepted, there's no registration fee. And you get to talk to practitioners. It's kind of a dream come true. And there was a lot in the Foresight community who said, I'd love to do it, but then none of them submitted extended abstracts to it. So Alexander, I agree with you, but this is back to why I said I'm here to kick these folks in the ass, is that they haven't taken advantage of it. Now, on the other side, there's been me and there's been another guy out of Sweden who have tried to integrate within the Foresight world, and that's it. So it seems like the academics, for whatever reason, have kept separate. And the only reason I get to play in the Foresight world is, frankly, Alexander, you and Oscar Saritas gave me the bona fides to allow me to be in that club. And I really appreciate it because that allowed me to see as an academic why these were coming together. While the practitioners had no problems bringing it together.
Okay, so we will try.
There's a question there in the box. Obviously, I can't read it, but I saw it pop up.
Yes.
Ian, good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you too.
Yeah.
We couldn't tell that you had eyesight problems.
I didn't.
Okay.
But what happened was that I was playing with my 3-year-old grandson and his elbow went in my eyes. I had no eye problems. The hospital, they said, we're used to this with mothers with their 2-year-old kids, not grandparents. And I'm in such good shape health-wise that I'm rough playing with my grandson all the time.
That's
This is all
great.
good news. But
That's
Okay,
great.
so probably we'll continue with the next presentation. Okay,
no, there's a question. Sorry, I apologize. There was a question you had there, Alexander.
Yeah, the question is, can you read it?
I can't read anything.
Are you serious gaming competitive intelligence as foresight game are developing in the foresight ecosystem? Could it be a way to blend both? It's more or less the same what I asked you. So
okay, no, that's fair. Then
Okay.
as my son would say, asked and answered.
Okay, good. So we are.
Hold on, we got to. You have a question, Rad.
We are continuing with our last presentation today. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we are running out of time. I'm sorry. Yeah. So our last speaker today is Ian Miles from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. He's an old friend of us. So Ian, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much. We'll see if I can display PowerPoints for you successfully.
Yes,
Okay, let's try.
Okay, the presentation will be devoted to technology foresight and technology assessment, divergence and or convergence.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoops.
It was an issue, by the way, in a UN event in Geneva last year.
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm talking really because I was inspired by that UN discussion held by the Committee on Science and Technology for Development, who have been doing some really interesting work on technology assessment, especially in African countries. So this is very much in gratitude to the work that they've been doing. What I'm trying to do, let me see. My slides are not moving on right now. This often happens. Page down. Yeah. I don't know if it's possible to display the PowerPoints that I sent to you. If you like, I will just ask you to move on when it's time to move on.
Ань, можете, да, слайды выставить, Иэна? Ань, вы с нами, Ань?
Да, сейчас, минуточку.
1 minute, please, yes.
Okay. I will speed up to deal with this. In any case, the big question is really how technology assessment and technology foresight relate together, and is that relationship changing? So it's actually rather similar to the competitive intelligence and foresight discussion that Jonathan was just conducting, and it's also relevant to Attila Havash's questions about future developments in foresight, because as he pointed out, what practice is very much influenced by the demand for practice. And one of the things that I want to do is talk about how technology assessment and technology foresight arose.
I'm sorry, Ian. Could you please close your presentation?
Right, I will do stop share. How is that?
And we open from our computer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can go straight onto the outline, the first slide now. So if we can move on. Right. Oh, I had a slide which is showing the outline, but the outline will be for me to talk very briefly about the origins of each of these fields, the factors leading to the development of the two fields, which I think we can look at in terms of communities of practice, but I won't discuss that theory right now, and talk about whether there is convergence going on and what that convergence is. One thing I would say to begin with, though, at this point at the bottom, I think that we actually see much of the practice that we now call technology assessment and technology foresight before these brand labels came to be applied to the activity in the field. The brand labels came as a community of practice developed and institutionalized, especially in Western countries, but more or less around the world. So you can see right back in the 1930s, there was very interesting work being conducted in the United States where simultaneously the same group of people were developing appraisals of the impact of technological change on the American economy and the workforce and job prospects and things like that. There was a big depression going on and people were very worried about unemployment. And they were developing tools for technology forecasting, and some of them went on to do some really interesting forecasting work in various technology spheres. But they didn't use the word technology assessment. They didn't use the word technology foresight all in that work. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, what the next slide will be is looking at just at the use of the terms technology assessment and technology foresight in the titles of publications in Scopus. So we might get a different picture if we looked at the use of these words in the text or in keywords. We might get a different picture. In fact, we would certainly get a different picture if we didn't just use Scopus, which is mainly scholarly publications. And if we instead used, say, Google Scholar, which captures a much wider range of things, probably about 10 times the number of publications on technology foresight appear in Google Scholar, for example, because it will capture lots of official reports, for example. But what we see here is, we've already gone on another slide, but this slide demonstrates that technology assessment appears as a piece of terminology around the late 1960s, early 1970s, and takes off in a very big way with peaks and then later some troughs, but still it remains an extremely active area of work. And what was the context of this? My suggestion is that this technology assessment was very much developing as a consequence of the large-scale change in industrial societies that happened in the era post-World War II. The large-scale introduction of new industrial techniques and agro-industrial techniques, and the concerns that were growing about the quality of working life, about pollution, about all sorts of impacts of this new technology and infrastructure that come to dominate the economies in the Western world. And there was pressure on representatives, parliamentarians, Congress people in the States, in liberal democracies, where people were asking questions about why there is this smell, why there is this noise, why insects are dying and birds are not appearing anymore, why jobs are becoming monotonous and repetitive, all sorts of things of this order. And technology assessment developed initially as a way of providing answers to politicians that were representing their citizens and needed to have answers often in a very short term. And this became institutionalized in technology assessment agencies around the world, or in particular in Western Europe, actually not so much around the world. And we saw a swarm of publications growing through the 1980s and beyond. Technology foresight, in contrast, is terminology that you only start seeing appearing in the 1990s, where it starts to displace, for a long time, it displaces a previous terminology, technology forecasting. It looks like in the title of articles, people weren't writing so much about technology forecasting as about technology foresight. And when that term appears in the titles, often what they're doing is writing about technology foresight processes and practices. Whereas with technology assessment, a lot of the time when people are using that terminology, they're talking about the technology assessment of this or of that technology related to this or that sort of issue. So the technology foresight discussion appeared, and it continues along at quite a level. But if we go to the next slide, oh no, I think so. Can we go quickly back to the previous slide? Yeah, what we see is that this fits in very much with Jonathan Kaloff was saying before. Strategic foresight has grown as importance in terminology. It's become more important than technology foresight in the title of publications captured by Scopus. So overall, we still see a lot more foresight publications if you add strategic foresight and technology foresight. More publications there than just on technology forecasting. I realize now I should have also looked at social forecasting, perhaps, to see if we could even out the picture a little bit. Okay.
Ian, excuse me, please. Ian, excuse me. We need to finish in 10 minutes your presentation maximum, okay?
I will move on
otherwise
very fast.
For technical reasons. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, let's move on 2 slides, I think. So foresight arose, technology foresight arose, my argument goes, because of competitive issues, really. It was initially extremely popular in Europe as providing a way for European countries to catch up with and find leadership in some areas of important technology which the United States have been moving ahead with. And European countries adopted technology foresight tools very much from the Japanese experience, which had been extremely important in helping Japan catch up with and attain leadership in critical technologies from the 1970s onwards. What we see in the technology foresight area is a shift from looking at particular technologies and selecting areas of research and development to broader thinking about innovation systems and their dynamics. And this includes organizational and socio-technical issues here. Next slide, please. So technology foresight and technology assessment grew to solve different sorts of social problems. And each was institutionalized in different sorts of organizations. And there are a number of critical differences between them as a result of this. So very often technology assessment was concerned with social impacts of technology, environmental impacts of technology, and so on. And so often risks and problems, whereas technology foresight was concerned with opportunities, with the potentials. And if it looked at things like risks, these were obstacles to be overcome in order to realize these potentials. Next slide, please. So there are a whole series of different things that contrast technology assessment and technology foresight. What issues and concerns they're interested in, whether they're interested in the shorter term, the medium term, the longer term, which aspects of technology they're looking at, particular applications, for example, or very early stage development of technologies, individual technologies or innovation systems, who they report to parliamentarians, members of parliament and the like, or to government agencies responsible for science, technology, innovation funding, what sorts of knowledge they're drawing on, economics in the case of foresight, management studies in the case of foresight, science and technology studies in both cases, and so on. Next slide, please. So my argument is the two have always overlapped. You will always have found some technology assessment studies dealing with the longer term, some technology foresight studies dealing with the shorter term. Next slide, please. But over time, and especially in this century, this overlap has grown a great deal more. And I'm attempting to demonstrate this quantitatively, but I haven't got my statistics together in time to be able to present them at this meeting. But this was also very much a theme of the UNCTAD workshop, which Alexander Sokolov reminded us of earlier. So there are many ways in which the two fields are becoming much more similar, but of course they still retain some of their own diverse elements. So next slide, please. What is behind this convergence? I would point to a number of different reasons. One is the speed of technological change, maybe not so much the pace of adoption as the development of technological capabilities, particularly in areas like information technology, less so in some areas of more material technology. Biotech is advancing really rapidly, however. Secondly, the complexity of technology. Oh, sorry. So that speed means that actually the distant future actually starts looking much more like the close future. And if you're just assessing what technology is in use right now, that might not be very helpful in a year's time. And looking 5 years ahead might be as challenging as looking 10 years ahead was in the past. And the technologies involved are complicated. They involve a whole range of different bodies of knowledge coming together, and a whole range of issues are associated with the introduction of innovations. And the next driving force is the shift in science, technology, and innovation policy towards dealing with grand challenges and broad issues, towards normative goals, beyond just the goals of economic growth and competitiveness. And the reason for this is a long and complicated story, which we're not going to go into right now. And the final one that I'm aware of is the demands for broader participation, involvement of different groups, wider groups of stakeholders in science, technology, innovation, decision-making. And that includes both technology assessment and technology foresight. So final slide, please. It seems to me, well, this is not quite the final slide, but that's good. We're likely to require both sorts of activity in the future, both technology assessment and technology foresight, and probably also to take into account other fields like competitive intelligence, risk assessment, environmental impact assessment, resilience studies, preparedness studies, a whole range of things where we're often confronted with very urgent demands to work out better, more interconnected policies, and policies that will actually really work to confront challenges. We saw during the pandemic that some of our policies were failing badly, although others were fantastically successful. The argument will be that there's a lot of scope for learning, sharing information, sharing resources between the areas of technology assessment and technology foresight, and we could develop and apply new tools to rapidly synthesize both sorts of activity. And here I'm particularly thinking of applying artificial intelligence in various forms. I think this is moving very, very rapidly. How do we achieve this institutionally? Do we bring our organizations together, have both assessment and foresight conducted by the same agencies? Do we create intermediary people that can be hybrid bearers of both sorts of knowledge and communicate between them? What other sorts of strategies can we be using here? That's a big challenge. And all of this is happening in a very unfortunate context, which Attila Havas also reminded us of. The post-truth, populism, distrust of experts, polarization of society, so that you in some countries now you cannot even do research on climate change if you call it climate change. Very problematic. So the very last slide, please, I think now. The last slide is end of presentation. That's good. Okay, I think I've just about kept the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for keeping time, because we need to finalize in 5 minutes for technical reasons, because this Zoom link will be used for students.
Yeah.
So we cannot keep them waiting. Okay, any questions so far to Ian? I'm afraid not so far. Maybe
No, sorry, I have
Attila.
a question.
Attila, please, yes.
I was trying to find the raise hand.
Please go ahead.
Ian, thanks for your thoughts. I wonder whether you would make a distinction between technology assessment when it is used by already kind of mature and widely applied technologies near to that stage when it is practically used, and a different one which is sometimes referred to as constructive technology assessment, when it is still quite far away from practical use. Because to my mind, constructive TA and foresight are the closest ones.
Yes. Yeah, completely agree. In my notes, I use the word constructive technology assessment here. That's one way in which TA has got a lot closer to technology foresight, and will use a lot of the same sorts of tools. And it's a very important development as well, because I think a limitation of a lot of past technology assessment was that it took designs and products that were being used more or less for granted, whereas there actually is a lot of scope for shaping the particular designs of technology, like famously the algorithms in social media that we're hearing about so much right now. We don't have to have those algorithms that lead to everybody seeing toxic content when they're using social media. That's a choice of the designers. And it's the sort of thing which the regulatory focus of a lot of technology assessment could have been brought to bear on if TA had been employed in earlier stages of the development of that technology.
Okay,
of course,
thank you very much. More questions, Attila?
Just a remark that it just occurred to me that originally I thought that TA is not shaping the future, but actually when TA leads to a restriction of using certain technologies like nuclear technology, then actually it is shaping the future, but in a different way as foresight would shape the future.
Yes.
So this is just a kind of mechanistic remark.
Yes, I think you're correct there, and often there will be forms of TA that are happening at a very local level, so that particular project might not go ahead because of its environmental consequences or its social consequences, or it might have to be redesigned to take a different form. Probably this has been the most impactful at least in recent years of TA work. But I may be wrong on that. It'd be good to find ways of assessing this.
Okay, my dear friends, I need to close our session. A few words to wrap up. First of all, I guess it was a very interesting and rich discussion, and we saw from the first presentation how big problems are ahead of us, and to be addressed by both foresight or technology assessment, whatever, or competitive intelligence. This is one point. Another point is that even for future foresight as such, we saw from Attila's presentation that there are so many issues to be addressed again, so that we could make it more fruitful, more efficient. And also what we saw from two last presentation, that really there are different instruments, and although they sometimes work very separately, we need to find a synthesis to take the best instruments, best approaches from each of them. And so it means that we should probably more often discuss what we can do jointly, or probably what we can grab from each other to make our work to produce better results. Okay, at this point, I would like to finish our session. It was a long day, and our interpreters made a great job. So I wanted to express our gratitude to them. They were very good. Yeah. Okay. At this point, I have to finish. Yeah. Thank you very much, and goodbye. I hope to see you tomorrow, because we have very interesting sessions again. Okay, thank you, and see you tomorrow probably. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.